Just to ground us in our wonderful webinar today, we want to welcome folks for joining us, and I'd love to hand it over to LADWP Commissioner Mia Lair to welcome us.
Buenas noches, good evening. Welcome everyone to this wonderful opportunity to learn how to keep your trees and landscapes alive and thriving during a drought. On behalf of the Board of Water and Power Commissioners, it is my pleasure to join this evening, and we are happy to team up with our city partner, City Plants, on this important webinar. Just a few weeks ago, the drought was the hot topic in the news. And while it's cold outside now, and we don't associate fall or winter with the drought because we may have occasional rain, we still need to continue tackling climate change head on, because it's a long-term and year-round serious matter, not just something that comes around during the summer. We all love trees and landscapes that clean the air, create shade, absorb polluted runoffs, support biodiversity, and make everything look so much more beautiful. But these are all threatened by climate change that cause extreme heat and drought. So the big question is, how can we keep our trees and landscapes alive? This matters a lot to us at DWP because we are keenly aware of the impacts these extreme weather patterns on our energy and water supplies can have. But we have also invested so much to plant trees through our partners like City Plants, and helping get more than 51 million square feet of turf removed and replaced with California-friendly landscapes. We cannot derail our important sustainability investments. They smell beautiful. They keep us, shaded. They bring birds. They bring butterflies and bees. We need them, and they're important. I'm looking forward to tonight's presentations and discussions about sustaining our trees and landscape, that we all work together to keep expanding our city canopy, improving energy efficiency, saving water, and beautifying our communities, one tree, one drop at a time. Thank you for being here, and thank you for caring about our trees on our streets, in our houses, in our schools, in our parks. You're an important part of making the city beautiful and healthy. And now I would like to pass it on to Rachel Malowich, who is the City Forest Officer, and will be talking to you about where we're going from here.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Lair, and to DWP for your leadership in putting together tonight's webinar, and to City Plants for helping to facilitate and provide this important information to our residents. So much of our urban forest and ecosystem services that forest provides exists on private property and is managed by you, our Angelinos, our residents. The decisions we make in our front and backyards, landscaping, have a huge impact on the health of our communities, both in terms of resilience to extreme heat and other impacts of climate change, like what Commissioner Lair was addressing, and in terms of our overall ecological health of our region. Trees are long-term investments that are important to maintain, and they appreciate over time. They get more valuable as they age. And you feel that when they shade your building and help you lower your air conditioning costs in the summer months, and sometimes even in the fall. But even the most drought-tolerant species sometimes need supplemental water during periods that are dry, extended dry periods, and periods of drought, to stay healthy and functioning. And you're going to be receiving some great resources tonight on how you can appropriately care for your trees in those times. I really appreciate DWP putting forward further resources for Angelinos to convert their current landscaping to native and drought-tolerant plants, and their commitment to the healthy urban forest. I'm going to take just a minute to provide a few reminders about our long-lived anchors in our yards, our trees, for those of you who may be considering converting your yard landscaping in light of our current experiences of drought and climate change, in addition to the information we'll receive from city plants. I've got 3 quick points, and I'm going to start with mature trees, as maintaining and preserving those healthy existing mature trees is our first priority and probably the reason you decided to join us tonight. First of all, whether you're doing the work yourself or hiring a landscape company to do it, I want to remind you of your tree's roots. A healthy mature tree has feeder roots, and those do the majority of the work absorbing water for the tree, and those extend out past the edge of the branches of your tree. So you're standing maybe not in the shade of your tree, you might be standing on some of the root system of that tree beneath the soil. We can't see them, so we sometimes forget they're there. Any work you do around the tree, digging, trenching, or even piling soil, can have a negative impact on that root system. We don't always see that impact right away, but it can cause harm to your tree that could cause it to decline in the months following your installation. So consider minimizing disturbances to tree roots as much as possible. Secondly, if you've had a lawn with regular irrigation, your existing tree has grown to its current size and based on that watering schedule. Again, even the most drought-tolerant species, that your specific tree will have grown based on that water resource that was available. So you'll need to help it transition from that watering schedule so it doesn't become stressed or die when you go from a lawn to a lower water use landscape. And then finally, if you're planting new plants and trees, please take this opportunity to research and learn more about the trees and plants that are native to your part of Los Angeles. You can use tools like CalScape website or Theodore Payne Foundation plant guides. And keep in mind that some of our native trees and plants naturally occur near waterways, our rivers, creeks, and streams, so they may or may not be appropriate for your yard as you transition to low water landscapes. I would also encourage you to support the city's metrics for our biodiversity index by getting your yard certified as a community wildlife habitat or ocean-friendly garden, and I'll put more information in the chat relative to how you could do that to support the city in measuring our biodiversity goals. Thanks again to City Plants and DWP for hosting this important event, and to all of you for your interest in caring for trees in light of our current water restrictions and within the new normal of drought and extreme heat. I look forward to working with you all more in the future.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Rachel. Great. I know we're really excited to dive into the content of today's webinar, but just to take a few moments to ground us in where we're headed, you've just heard from Commissioner Lair and from our City Forest Officer, Rachel Mallarich, and in just a few moments, you'll hear from LADWP's Manager of Water Resources Policy, Terrence McCarthy, who's going to share with you about DWP water conservation rebates and programs. And then myself and Christina Basurto, City Plants' Community Organizing Manager and an ISA certified arborist, will dive into water-wise tree care 101, and we've even sprinkled in some of the things that Rachel's alluded to about how to properly plant a tree and what to look for when you're considering what tree to plant. And then we will have a brief question and answer session. The goals of today, really to celebrate you, all the folks who are here. I see there are almost 300 people Zooming in tonight, which is really, really exciting, and we are so glad that you're with us. We wanted to take the moment to celebrate this milestone of decreased water consumption during this historic drought and to congratulate you for doing your part to motivate you to keep up the momentum. We want to empower you and connect you directly with DWP water conservation, rebates, tree care resources. We want to communicate the importance of young and mature tree care and tree preservation during the drought. And we want to remind you all that trees are critical climate resilience city infrastructure. Before we get started, a few community guidelines. We ask that you please be respectful and supportive of presenters and each other. We also ask, we will have a Q&A session at the end. You should be able to access that the Q&A button down at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And you can type in your questions in the chat, and at the end, our moderator will select questions to read aloud for panelists to answer. And then to keep in mind that today we offer this webinar in the spirit of collaboration, learning, growth, and celebration, and we invite you to participate with that spirit in mind. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to DWP, and we'll have Terrence McCarthy take it away with some rebate information and water conservation programs from DWP. Take it away, Terrence.
All right, thank you, Rachel. Good evening, everybody. My name is Terrence McCarthy. I am the Manager of Water Resources Policy here at the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. And before I jump into our plethora of rebates and other things to help you in transitioning during these drought periods, I want to go over a quick overview of the department and how we got here into the drought conditions we're in now. So next slide, please. So first off, just a general overview of LADWP and how much water we serve to folks and the number of people, over 4 million people in Los Angeles that we serve water to. You'll see in the map here, we outlined the city boundaries and our service territory boundaries. And we kind of identified the different areas of the city, the valley, the West LA, Central LA, East Los Angeles, and the harbor. And one of the reasons we do that is because the different water supplies that come into the city are feeding these different areas of the city. And so it's good to kind of keep this in context in terms of the western part of the city, the valley, East and harbor get similar water sources as well. So just keep that in mind as I move forward and talk about our supply sources. Next slide, please. So Los Angeles gets has a very diverse water supply portfolio. And first off, if we click on the first supply source, we have the State Water Project. And that project brings water down from the San Francisco Bay Delta system and delivers that down to Southern California. You'll see that purple boundary is a area that Metropolitan Water District, who is our wholesale provider, they serve water to that entire area that's bounded in purple. And we purchase water from MWD, as they're called, from the State Water Project. Another source that we purchase water from is the Colorado River Aqueduct, and that also comes from Metropolitan Water District. The next source of water is our Los Angeles Aqueduct that William Mulholland constructed to bring water from the Eastern Sierras down to Los Angeles, which is the orange shaded area down at the bottom there. But then we also have local supplies that we draw from in our groundwater basins and also recycled water. And we also include conservation and also demand management in our local supplies. If we click one more, it should show that. So that's kind of our supply mix. But one thing that I want you to pay attention to is the State Water Project water, as well as the Colorado River water, because those are the water supply sources, along with the aqueduct, that are stressed right now in terms of providing water to the city. Next slide, please. So as you can see from this graphic, this shows a timeline of the drought conditions in California, going all the way back to the end of last year, where at the end of December, we had a pretty good rainstorm there, but we still had most of the state in extreme or severe drought conditions. Fast forward to the middle of the summer, and we had very extreme drought conditions and extreme drought conditions throughout the state. As we moved into September and November, even though we did have some precipitation in November, those areas of very extreme drought conditions or exceptional drought conditions, which is the dark brown, still existed throughout the state. And so as we go into the winter, we're hoping that we get precipitation to alleviate some of these drought conditions. But the long-range forecast from NOAA, or the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, is calling for another La Nina year, which La Nina years traditionally are dry during the winter. And so the forecast long range does not look good thus far. So that's why we need to prepare now. So next slide. So we have had 3 consecutive dry years in California, and with that long range forecast looking like we may have a 4th one coming, we want to do all we can. But I wanted to show this graphic just to show you and demonstrate that State Water Project water, which is where LADWP purchases most of its water from, has seen an extreme change in the variability in the amount that comes from the State Water Project. The graphic on the left shows essentially the allocations that come from the State Water Project. From the 80s through 2000, we had a pretty consistent allocation or amount of water we received from this, or we were provided for from the State Water Project. And so it was pretty consistent. And then in the early 2000s, we started to see some moderate variability. And if you remember back to then, you know, we did have a few drought periods then, specifically 2008 through 2010, we saw another multi-year drought period. And then from 2012 to 2022, we've seen extreme variability in the supplies from the State Water Project. And so that just gives you some context in terms of how our water supply situation has changed as a result of climate change and these more frequent and more prolonged drought periods. Next slide, please. So in the past years, we've had these dry periods, and just recently in the past year, we have received minimal allocations from that State Water Project. What that has caused is these areas in dark orange you see are what we call State Water Project dependent areas. And what that means is that these areas can only get water from the State Water Project. Colorado River water cannot move up into these areas, and they're really reliant on that water from up north from the Bay Delta. And when you have shortages in the Bay Delta, these areas are impacted the most. And so what happened was Metropolitan Water District went into an allocation for these State Water Project dependent areas last year. And we were limited in terms of the amount of water we could purchase from the State Water Project in these areas specifically. And you'll notice that a good portion of Los Angeles, the Valley area, the West Side, and even central Los Angeles were impacted by that. Our East Los Angeles section and Harbor section that I mentioned before, those do receive Colorado River water, and so they were not as impacted by the shortage on the State Water Project. However, you've probably heard in the news that the Colorado River is also experiencing its own shortages. So we have to look at it a little more holistically. Next slide, please. So in response to this shortage on the State Water Project, Metropolitan Water District instituted an emergency water conservation program and gave those agencies in the State Water Project dependent areas 2 paths they could choose from. Path 1 on the left side required agencies to go to 1 day a week watering, but would have no volumetric limit in terms of the amount of water they drew from the State Water Project. And that had to be in place by June 1st with enforcement in that requirement. If needed, they would go to 0 day watering should they not have seen a response given the 1 day a week watering restriction. Path 2, however, set volumetric limits. So monthly limits were set as to how much water you could purchase from the State Water Project. If you click one more time, LADWP chose path 2 for our customers because we felt, given our long history of conservation, we did not want to go straight to 1 day a week watering because we felt we could manage our water supplies and still maintain the volumetric limits that Metropolitan had put forth. There was a penalty that comes if you exceed your volumetric limit. But given some operational flexibility we have in our system, we were able to stay within those volumetric limits and avoided any penalties during the summertime, which is when we see our peak demands come through. And so you may be wondering, how did we do that? And if we go to the next slide, I can walk you through what we instituted and had in place to help us through that process. So we've had our water conservation ordinance in place for decades now, and it has a series of phases that escalate with continued drought periods when we forecast our supplies will not meet our demands. So phase one, all of those restrictions you see there are permanent restrictions and have been in place for decades, as I said. Phase two, we went into in 2009 when we saw those initial dry periods that we experienced on the State Water Project system. And we were in phase two ever since 2009, going up to this most recent allocation. And what that did is it limited outdoor watering to 3 days a week, in addition to all of those permanent restrictions. And if we click one more time, you'll see that we started thinking about, okay, what are our options moving forward? And we thought about moving into the next phase. And if we click again, we can go to where we ended up, which was phase three, which we went into and made effective as of June 1st, which limited irrigation to 2 days a week, as well as the permanent restrictions you saw before, and also had some additional recommendations. If the shortage conditions deteriorated as we move forward through the summer, we would have had to go to phase four, which is the 1 day a week watering and those additional restrictions, or even phase five with no outdoor watering. However, customers did respond throughout the summer as we had expected them to. And we did stay within our volumetric limits just at phase three and still allowed for those 2 days a week irrigation, which not only helped landscapes, tolerate the high temperatures we saw in the summer, but also I think assisted in a lot of the trees surviving through that period. So next slide, please. So some of the things with our ordinance that allowed for trees to be maintained during these dry periods was that it allows for hand watering any day of the week, as long as it's before 9 a.m. and after 4 p.m. And hand watering of your trees is probably one of the most efficient ways to water your landscape and your trees, because you're monitoring how that water is going into the ground, and you can see whether there's too much water, not enough, and you know when to shut it off when your soil becomes saturated, which makes it very efficient and also helps the distribution of that water. Another thing that we recommend doing, and I'm sure Rachel will go into more detail on this, is using soaker hoses or drip lines to irrigate around the tree's root zone, and that will help maintain your tree health through the drought. And also, when you use those soaker hoses and drip lines, you can extend the amount of time that you irrigate for the tree canopy. So if we go to the next slide, I can get into some of the achievements we've made because we've been at it for 30 plus years, of mandatory ordinances. We've reduced our per capita uses by over 30% in the last 15 years. I believe Commissioner Lair mentioned that we've done, roughly 52 million square feet of turf thus far. But we do need to continue the effort to ensure that our supplies are maintained as we move forward. Next slide, please. So what are some of the changes we've made to help customers in this irrigation restriction period? Some of the things we've done is we've reopened recycled water fill stations, which recycled water is another water supply you can use without having to face the restrictions of the ordinance. And so those fill stations allow for customers to go and fill up, I believe it's 300 gallons worth of recycled water at various sites throughout the city. And so that could be used to irrigate trees, irrigate landscapes, with the recycled water. We've also increased our conservation incentives for nearly all of our programs across the board. And so I'll get into those details in the next slide. So our residential rebate program, we have made some changes in terms of the cost of what we provide customers to replace their turf. We had our incentive at $3 per square foot prior to October 1st. But given that now is the best time to do planting and plant those trees and plant those drought tolerant gardens, we wanted to boost the incentive to $5 per square foot to help drive people towards that incentive and drive people towards a drought tolerant native landscape that not only incorporates, drought tolerant plants, but also incorporates trees that provide shade for your home and provide that cool opportunity out in your landscape to be able to enjoy during those summer months. We also have our rotating sprinkler nozzles that we reduce the minimum amount that you need to purchase to be eligible for that incentive, which is now 15 nozzles. If you do 15, you'll get $6 per nozzle, up to $6 per nozzle. And then we have our weather-based irrigation controller to help you better plan out your irrigation and comply with the ordinance requirements. Next slide, please. So we haven't shied away from the indoor incentives either. We boosted our toilet incentive from $150 per toilet to $250. We boosted the clothes washer to $500. And then another important incentive that we have is our rain barrels and cisterns, which can provide that irrigation water after a rain that you can use to irrigate trees and your landscape with a self-closing hand watering. We also launched the Flume home water monitoring device. And this device, what it does is it allows you to see how much water you are using outdoors. It also allows you to see how much water you're using on your devices on indoors as well. And it provides an opportunity for you to identify those areas that you maybe haven't thought about before. If you thought, oh, I don't use that much water outdoors, it provides you insight as to how much is used on your landscape and could really provide that driving factor. That is a device that straps around your meter and gives you real-time water usage information on your smart device. And it'll even send you notifications if you have a leak in your piping at your home or even in your irrigation system. And you'll be able to see the minute-by-minute usage to be able to identify those opportunities. That device comes in at $24 after all the discounts, which is a real steal when the retail price is $199. So we'd encourage single-family residential customers to take part in that program. So next slide, please. Some additional services we have to help remove the burden or remove the hurdles, should I say, for customers is we started doing turf replacement design services where we will come out to your home and we will do a customized design for your yard after you put in some preferences for us. And we'll give you a customized design to do a turf replacement project for free. And this is a great incentive because we heard from customers, one of the biggest challenges was they didn't know how to do the designs to make a drought tolerant or native landscape in their yard. If you click on one more, we also are incorporating specific irrigation, drip irrigation to put around trees to ensure that those trees do get that supplemental water during these drought periods and limited irrigation. And so that's something that we want to ensure that we incorporate, that everyone keeps in mind, not only irrigating existing trees, but also new trees to help them get established correctly and more tolerant to these drought conditions. So if we go to the next slide, we also have hands-on workshops that customers can go out and actually see how landscape conversions are done. They can actually get their hands dirty and learn the appropriate way to remove your turf and plant your drought-tolerant landscapes, as well as modify your irrigation system. You'll also see here that there's a lot of mulch that we incorporate into these projects and it's one of the requirements of the turf replacement rebate. But another thing that I do want to mention is that City Plants, as our partner, does provide for free trees to incorporate into your new landscape. And so this hands-on workshop goes through everything, including how to plant your new trees to ensure that it thrives once it's planted. So these are just some of the things LADWP has available for you to adjust your landscape, modify your landscape, and also learn more on what you can do to help with the drought. So if we go to the next slide, I just want to provide some links here to our rebates and incentives. Also, we have our 2020 Urban Water Management Plan. So if you want to learn more about our supply sources, where they come from, how we're developing more local supplies, you can go there. And then also, I wanted to give a quick plug to the state of California has a Save Our Water site, but there's a specific Save Our Trees sub-site or mini site on that webpage to tell you different tips and tools on how to care for your trees during the drought. So with that, I'll kick it over to Rachel.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Terrence, for walking us through all the work that DWP does day in and day out to protect our water supply and strategize, but walking us through those options for Angelenos of what we can do from here on out to make sure that we keep up the wonderful momentum. I think you mentioned that, and Commissioner Lair mentioned that it relies on each and every one of us to protect LA's water supply, and you all, DWP does a wonderful job at making sure we're equipped with those tools. For those with us, we're pivoting now a little bit related content, but today's webinar theme and title was really how to keep your trees and landscapes thriving. And so in addition to those resources that Terrence and DWP shared, we wanted to take some time to talk about how we can both save our water and our trees. And before we get started, I'm going to bring my counterpart on as well, Christina Basurto. So I'll be sharing a little bit of information, and then Christina Basurto will walk us through some tree care for particularly young trees. But I wanted to start with this question of why trees and why now? I think in amidst the drought, it can feel kind of doom and gloom sometimes about what's the long-term solution for us. What are we able to do? And I want to anchor us in these two questions. Why are we talking about saving trees and keeping trees thriving during the drought? And why now? And the idea here is that trees are one of our absolute best defenses against climate change on the local level. They protect us from drought and from extreme heat, and we need LA's urban forests now more than ever. And when I refer to our urban forest, I think our city forest officer did a really good job of this, but what do we mean by our urban forest, right? So we're talking about not just the trees on private property, the trees in your front, side, backyard. We're also talking about the publicly managed trees. So trees in parks and open space, in medians, along streets. We're talking about the native trees and some of the species in Southern California that play a significant role in aiding our biodiversity. And all of this together constitutes the urban forest. So it's not just the trees in your backyard, it's all of the trees together. And LA has a huge urban forest. It's an estimated 10 million trees in Los Angeles in our urban forest, and also one of the most diverse. We are lucky enough to have a citywide inventory happening right now. And the Streets LA Urban Forestry Division is mapping every single street tree in the city's boundaries. And then we also have an interactive park tree inventory. So you can actually access that online. We'll make sure to send that information over to you. And all in all, trees cool our city. They save lives, they capture stormwater, and they support the long-term health of our water supply. I think sometimes we forget that trees are a really critical foundation in the water cycle, right? Trees' roots do so much to capture stormwater, capture runoff, they intercept that stormwater and use it and help us replenish groundwater aquifers and groundwater systems, which is a really critical function in addition to all of the other benefits that they provide. But the urban forest and LA's water supply, I think if you take away one thing from today's webinar, it's the idea that they go hand in hand, right? We need our trees and we also need water for our long-term resilience against climate change. And we also wanted to take the time today to just kind of spread this message, keep watering and planting trees during the drought. I know in previous years I've been thinking back to 2015, when there was another very serious period of the drought that we're in. I think there was some confusion about where trees fit into that equation. Do we keep watering trees and do we keep planting them? These are all questions that I imagine I know a lot of Angelenos had, and I'm really happy to say that this time we're making sure to get ahead of that messaging and want you to walk away from this webinar feeling empowered to continue to water and plant trees and to be a steward of our urban forest, and to see that as a very critical and important role in protecting our long-term water supply. And I do want to take a moment too to just quickly kind of mention the equity component of this work too, right? When we talk about how trees save lives or how trees provide shade and cool our cities, one of the many, many benefits that trees provide, one benefit that a lot of us point to, are starting to point to more and more and elevate more, is the way that trees can cool down our urban environments. And so in just last year, July of 2021, National Geographic put LA's urban forest on the map and on the cover of the magazine itself. And this article talked about particularly the discrepancies between canopy cover and shade and income and race, right? So this is not something that just the city of Los Angeles struggles with. Cities all across the country are feeling this same acute pressure, but in LA, where there's high canopy, the highest amounts and most dense canopy is in wealthier neighborhoods. And this photographer actually followed one city street. It's, I believe, along Vermont, starting from Los Feliz down to Pico Union, and followed one 6-mile stretch in a wealthy area and then a historically redlined area in Pico Union. So you're looking along one Los Angeles street, wealthy areas are shady and cool, tree canopy decreases and temperatures rise as you drive south, and on a warming planet, this divide between rich and poor leaves many at risk. And the LA Times too is also last year picking up on this urban heat reality, and as a result of systemic racism and policies like redlining, poor neighborhoods are bearing the brunt of extreme heat. And so when we talk about why we need to prioritize our urban forests, why we need to care about our urban forests and continue stewarding our trees in times of drought, this plays a big role in that, right? We need to make sure that all Angelenos have equal access to trees and their benefits. And trees are a really fantastic tool on the local level to protect people from extreme heat. And to actually save lives. There's some incredible research from the LA Urban Cooling Collaborative that shows even just slight increases in total shade in neighborhoods can directly translate into lives saved and during extreme heat events. And not too long ago, the LA Times published this article really calling on all of us to keep our trees alive despite the unprecedented watering restrictions and this historic drought that we're in. And so more and more we're starting to see trees talked about and treated as critical city infrastructure, trees being treated like light fixtures on the corner of your street, or bus stops, or metros, or buses, right? Trees really do make the places we live feel like home, and they directly translate into they're a local level climate resilience solution. And so I think many of you, I'm hoping some of you can think about benefits, particular benefits that trees provide you as an individual. There are so many. And there's all sorts of studies being done on how trees not only take harmful climate change pollutants out of the air, they take carbon dioxide and turn it into oxygen, which is what we all need to breathe. Talk about magic and alchemy. But tons of work showing, research showing the correlation between student test scores and access to green space, enhancing kind of student functionality and student functions, and how we perform in school and how we relate to each other. Lots of social science research being done on that. They cool our city, as I mentioned, but they capture stormwater and intercept harmful pollutants that are on our streets and sidewalks before they get to the ocean. And they have huge public health benefits. And sometimes in some cases can really provide social cohesion in neighborhoods, right? But there's one tree benefit that I wanted to highlight today to kind of anchor us as we talk about why we need to be caring for our trees. In addition to public heat, it's energy efficiency. City Plants is a free tree program for anybody who lives in the city of Los Angeles. And we are funded by the Department of Water and Power, who has been a longstanding leader in urban forestry for decades now. And the way that funding gets to us is because we actually track all of the kilowatt hours saved for the trees that we plant through the program. And trees, by shading buildings, reduce your energy costs, reduce your energy bills through that shade that they provide, right? And so for the trees that, if anybody's received a free tree from City Plants, we actually project how many kilowatt hours that tree will save in its life, over the course of its life, and share that data with DWP. A little bit about City Plants and who we are. Our vision, as I mentioned, is we want to grow an LA in which every single person has, in every neighborhood, has equal access to trees and their benefits. So clean air, better health, cooling shade, energy efficiency, and a friendlier, more vibrant neighborhood. I want to take a few moments quickly to talk about our programs, but for all the folks who registered and who are with us tonight, we will be sending out a big email with all sorts of links to resources on how to access all of the programs that Terrence mentioned and the programs that City Plants offers as well. But in partnership with the LA Conservation Corps, we deliver up to 7 free shade trees straight to your door for you to plant on private property. And this is our delivery van with our mascot, Leafy. Here's a shot of us delivering some of those trees. We also work with many different organizations to host what we call tree distributions or tree adoption events. This one is a shot from Arbor Day last year in South LA, where we gave out 150 trees so folks can take them home when coming to a community event. And if you want us to host a tree adoption, you are free to reach out to us, and if we can find and secure a partner to attend that event, we will be there. And we also plant street trees. We work with partners at the city, with the Streets LA and Urban Forestry Division, but also those nonprofit partners that I mentioned, LA Conservation Corps, Koreatown Youth and Community Center, Northeast Trees, LA Beautification Team, and many others to plant street trees, free street trees for you, as long as you sign an agreement to water that tree. So I hope we've hyped you up enough on kind of the context of why trees matter, why trees, why now, why is it important that we continue to steward our trees amidst a historic drought. And with that, I want to hand it over to my wonderful colleague, Christina, to walk us through a little bit of, let me just make sure to get you spotlit here, of tree planting 101. We're going to do a little crash course in tree planting. Take it away, Christina.
Good evening, everyone. As Rachel mentioned, planting trees in this time of drought is important for our communities. But what should we keep in mind when we're considering planting a tree? When most folks are thinking of planting a tree, they focus on, is the tree going to give me shade? Is it going to create privacy? Is it going to give me fruits or nuts? Where am I going to put it? You know, am I going to put it in the front yard, backyard, or is it going to go in my parkway? Those are all great things to think about. But the most important thing to keep in mind is the right tree, the right place, the right reason. The right species is the key. Next slide, please. So when selecting your tree, you have several things to consider. Is it climate appropriate? You know, take into account the sunset climate zone. Our climate is changing and these zones are shifting. Conditions are getting hotter and drier, more extreme heat. It's keeping that in mind. In making your tree selection is important. Also consider how much water does your tree need? How much sun is it going to need? And what type of soil will it be able to thrive in? Next slide, please. Another thing to consider when planting your tree is making sure that you keep it at the correct planting depth. As you can see in these images, when there's the correct planting depth is at where the root flare starts. This is, if you imagine yourself as a tree, the neck, think of your neck as part of the trunk. And as when your neck starts starting here over your shoulders, it's similar to what a tree is in the ground. So in the images before, Rachel?
Sorry, Christina, I'm getting, I think it's starting to play on its own. Give me 1 second here. Sorry.
What happened here?
Sorry, guys. Okay, let's try this again. Sorry about that. All right, go back to your wonderful tree and neck analogy. Sorry to interrupt.
It's okay. So when the root flare is where the trunk widens at the bottom. When the tree is planted too low, the soil goes up against the trunk and it can lead to trunk rot. If it's too high, it's exposing the roots and it can dry them out. So the key to remember, roots like the dart, they like to remain covered and the trunk likes to show off and it doesn't want to be covered. Next slide. Okay, so on different trees refer different types of soil. Getting to know the soil of your tree, the soil type that your tree prefers, it's great for you to keep in mind. So, because it'll help you. Sorry, my mouth just dried up. How much water your tree can take in based on the soil you have. Keep in mind that in urban settings, we have a lot of compacted soil. The trees will need some more additional love from you. Next slide. So young trees, what we consider a young tree is a tree that is newly planted and has been planted for up to 5 years. Next slide. Caring for your young tree starts with observation. So learn your tree species, the age, the surrounding soil condition, and its microclimate. If you look and listen closely, your tree is going to tell you what it needs. Your tree is talking to you when its leaves turn yellow or when its leaves start looking droopy. It's the tree's way of asking you for some love. So just keep in mind, keep an eye on it. Next slide. Young trees under 5 years old require a little bit more watering. It's just like a child that under 5, they require more attention. So does a tree. Keep in mind that to watering your young trees every 2 weeks, and if it's newly planted, to water it once a week with about 10 to 15 gallons of water. I know that sounds like a lot of water, but we did the math for you. It costs about $10 a year to water your tree for every 2 weeks within a year. To ensure that your tree is taking advantage of all that water, build a berm on the base of the tree. It's like, imagine it's like a cereal bowl for your tree. It allows it to catch all the water and trickle it down to its roots where it's needed. Next slide, please. You know, mulch is amazing. Mulch is your tree's best friend. So it allows, like this image says, it conserves the moisture, it prevents weeds, it insulates the roots from extreme temperatures, and it restores those beneficial nutrients. It's, as you can see it on this image, it's just a lot of the best mulch that you can find. It's like sticks, tree barks that are like shredded like this. Next slide, please. This is the perfect image of what not to do. When applying mulch, remember not to create a mulch volcano, as you see here. Make sure to keep the mulch a fist bump away from the trunk. Remember, the trunk likes to show off, it likes to be seen. So this will allow, it'll avoid root rot, which can eventually kill your tree. The root flare and the base of the tree should always be clear of mulch and of any rocks as well. Next slide, please. This is a great site. I'd encourage you to take a snapshot of this picture. This is a site where you can go, where you can go and pick up some free mulch. This is available to all City of Los Angeles residents. It is available through the Department of Rec and Parks, LA Sanitation, Street Trees Division. You can pick it up yourself at one of the various locations across the city. You just need to bring your own shovel, a bag, or a pickup to load it up and in your own containers, and you can take as much as you need. Next slide, please. So typically, what we consider a mature tree is a tree that is about 5 years old and older from planting. Typically, it's a tree that you cannot wrap your hand, a single hand around its trunk. And if you push the trunk slightly, you'll notice that there's no movement in the base of the tree. That's letting you know that the tree is already established. That tree is also no longer going to need the stakes on the side or the ties. Next slide. If you notice this slide, this one is very important and particular to us. There's a misconception that a tree needs to be heavily pruned to be healthy. I encourage you never to prune a mature tree more than 20% or 25% of a young tree per year. This practice on the left-hand side is what we call topping. It is a drastic removal and cutting back of large branches. It is generally done on mature trees, leaving stubs in place of branches, which can also leaves them susceptible to disease and decay. Topping doesn't consider the tree's health. The practice causes immediate injury to the tree by destroying its structural stability and weakening new growth. This practice can ultimately result in the tree's death. I strongly encourage you to avoid topping at all costs. Next slide. And I am going to hand this over to Rachel. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Christina, and please feel free to chime in when I miss something here, but I do want to point out, I know we're almost at time and we have a little bit more in store for you. So for folks who are able to stick around, we've got a little bit more and we'll try to wrap up shortly. But Christina did a great job of talking about what are our considerations for tree planting, even kind of bringing us to our attention, the most common mistakes, right? Planting too low or too high are one of just the most common mistakes. Wanting to make sure that that root flare is planted right at soil depth, and that you build a strong berm. And we want to talk a little bit more about how young tree care and mature tree care might differ a little bit. So some things to think about after that 3 to 5 years is when a tree is considered established, right? They generally require less frequent watering. And we suggest up to once a month if needed, and especially during those hot and dry spells. But again, as Christina mentioned, it really does start with observation. Look at your tree, Have set your kind of morning coffee date with your trees, the trees in your community if you don't have any in your backyard, the trees in your parks, your street, along your streets. What is that tree telling you? If it's showing signs of stress like yellowing or wilting leaves or branch dieback, it might be time to water that tree. And the key with mature tree care is deep watering of the root zone. So what you see here is the drip line where the outer edge of the canopy ends. You want to make sure to saturate the soil 6 to 12 inches deep to hydrate your tree, and make sure to do that all around the root zone, right? And one thing that we also wanted to remind you of, it's great to check your soil. You can do what's called a soil test and just probe within the drip line a few inches down using a screwdriver or a mini shovel, and take a look at that soil. If it's dry and crumbly, your tree might be a little thirsty. If it's clumping together, perhaps your tree is sated and has enough water for now. So you can have the soil kind of tell you how much your tree is in need of a nice cold drink. So like I mentioned, that deep root watering is key. Watering with sprinklers generally only reaches the first few inches of soil, and that encourages weak surface roots. So it encourages roots to grow like this instead of strong tap roots that anchor the tree and help with its stability and overall growth. So a slow, deep soak of your tree's root zone under that canopy, all the way to the edge of the drip line, really supports those strong anchor roots and the structural growth. A general comment not to overwater. Sometimes this happens too, especially when we're learning about tree care, we might be a little overly enthusiastic. And it's really just important, again, to listen to the tree. If anybody's had a house plant before, you might have run into this problem as well. So kind of observation is where we encourage you to start, and to start that relationship with your tree. And then a note that trees prefer infrequent deep watering over frequent light watering. So allow the soil to dry out in between watering sessions. But if you take anything away from this on mature tree care, it's really to deeply water your trees. We would be remiss if we did not mention the opportunity to capture and reuse rainwater at home. But it's not just the rainwater, right? Terrence mentioned all of those rebates that are available to DWP customers for cisterns and rain barrels, which are great and easy to do and set up at home. My family has a trash can, like an old trash can that we use outside to harvest rain. We have yet to set up a cistern, but that's coming up. So there are alternative options if you haven't been able to set up a cistern or a formal rain barrel yet. It's just about thinking like a watershed. All of that rain that's fallen from the sky, when it does come down, with the limited precipitation that we get in Los Angeles, we can be using that. We can be harvesting that, and your trees will love you for it. So think about ways where in your footprint, in your home, maybe in your apartment building, at your school, at your job, you can start to harvest some of that rainwater, to capture it and redirect it and put it to good use where your trees will really appreciate that water. And if that's not within reach for you, there are some small things you can do, like saving shower water when you're waiting for your shower to heat up. I know I like showers nice and hot. It's really easy to put a 5-gallon bucket in the shower and capture that water and reuse it. You can use water for washed produce or even leftover water from pet bowls. We use that with my dog. Any water, she's a little snooty. If she doesn't want to drink the water, we'll water our Meyer lemon tree with it. So it works out well. And I know Christina and I have talked a little bit about tree irrigation for young trees and mature trees. But we want to talk specifically, call out what are the ways that you can actually water your tree. So there's always the hand watering method with a hose or a bucket. And within DWP's water ordinance, this is allowed between before 9 a.m. and after 4 p.m. So watering your trees is okay during this drought, as kind of the resounding message of tonight's webinar and theme. And again, this starts with having a relationship with your tree. So maybe I've heard, I know Rachel Mallarich had shared the idea that, like, when you take out your trash in the evenings once a week, maybe that's the date you have to water your tree as well. Here's the bucket method. You can fill up a 5-gallon bucket, a Home Depot bucket, any bucket you have around the house, and pour that slowly into the berm and let the water sink into the soil with 10 to 15 gallons is what we say. There's also the tree watering bag. There are many options for this on the market. If you don't want to stand there and watch the water sink deeply into the soil before watering with all 10 to 15 gallons, you can get what's called the tree bag. And all this does essentially is slowly trickle that water down to the roots, into that root zone of the tree, to give it a really good shot at making it through its establishment period and beyond. And then Terrence mentioned this as well, but the soaker hose method, this is actually really cost effective. You can get these at any home department store. And you can set it up to your hose, and what we encourage is, again, thinking about how to water within that drip line. So kind of creating, lining the soaker hose underneath the entire canopy of the tree. And it allows that water to really sink into the soil and to saturate the soil, and focuses on that root zone. There's also a do-it-yourself drip irrigation method, which we've seen other cities using as well. So you can actually get a bucket and poke holes in the bottom with a nail and a hammer, and fill that bucket up 2 or 3 times until your tree is watered, and that allows the water to penetrate deep into the soil in that root zone. And with that, we actually at City Plants have partnered with Dashboard Earth for an interactive tree care experience delivered straight to you. So it's kind of like tree care personalized. You can download this app by scanning the QR code or visiting the website down here mentioned on this slide. And this app will teach you tree care best practices. So you'll hear a lot of what we shared today and more. You'll get personalized watering reminders. I know sometimes we all need a reminder. And you'll be able to discover other hyper local actions from City Plants and other climate resilience orgs in the region, working towards similar climate justice and climate resilience goals, and offering different programs. We have that here as well in Spanish for our folks. And I think that's about it. We want to just give a quick shout out to all of the partners who work day in and day out to make LA's urban forest strong and healthy and vibrant, and who steward and protect it, and to some of our state and federal partners as well. But a big shout out to LADWP, who funds the City Plants program, but has through their leadership and investment in urban forestry and LA's free tree program, really kind of led the way, particularly on why tree care is so important during the drought. And we really appreciate all the folks at DWP for inviting us to share this information with you today. We do want to have, I think we'll take 1 or 2 questions, and if I could have Veronica from our team share some of those questions. I know there are a lot of questions, and we will not be able to get to all of them today given the time, but We also will be sending a follow-up email with all of the resources that we shared in this webinar with you. The links that Terrence shared, a lot of the resources Rachel and Commissioner Lair mentioned. And we also actually today are releasing a new tree care during the drought guide. So Veronica was going to pop that in the chat for you all to download, but we'll send that in an email as well. So we can't get to all of your questions, but we so appreciate you being here, and we'll take one or two.
Yeah, one of our earlier questions that we got regarding the City Plants program was that Rebecca Youssef said, I ordered my City Plants tree months ago and haven't heard back. Is there a long wait list?
Yeah, it's a great question. There is a wait list. So currently we're in between funding cycles from DWP, and so it's taken us a little bit longer to be able to fulfill some of the requests we have gotten in the last 5 months, but we expect that come January and early 2023 will be back up and running. And so we're going to start with all of those pending requests that we have not been able to get to yet. But so Rebecca, we will get you your trees, and if it's not too much to ask, we'll try to follow up with you after this webinar, or you can reach out to us via email, and we will make sure to get you your trees.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. This one's for Christina. Jose Munoz asked, what was the neck/tree analogy that Christina started but did not finish?
Hi everyone. I was trying to describe how what the root flare looks like in comparison to our bodies as our neck when it flares out. So that's what I was trying to illustrate. So because that was what when I was training to be an arborist, that was the easiest way for me to understand it. The roots are the trunk needs to be straight, and then it gets to that neck section and it'll flare out. So that's what I was just trying to illustrate.
Kind of like where the neck meets the shoulders.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the idea there is to not plant it too deep. When you were telling me this, if you plant, you remember what you said? Do you want to share that?
Yes. So if you plant it too deep, it's like if you're planting yourself and you're covering your nose, so it doesn't allow the tree to take in oxygen. The roots need to take in oxygen as well. So it would be the same thing, you'd be suffocating the tree. And if you plant it too low, then you're exposing yourself. So you don't want to do that. And you want to keep that nicely covered. So that's the analogy, and that's how I was able to remember what the root flare was.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a great mnemonic device to help us remember. I think it was too low or too high when you're planting is what you want to look out for. I think we'll do one more question, Veronica.
Awesome. Yes, this one's actually from Jose. He asked, will slides be available for future reference?
Yeah, so in the follow-up email to everybody who registered, we will make sure to send out the slides, the recording, and links to probably more resources than you'll know what to do with, but we hope that this information is useful, and we'll make sure to follow up with that, Jose. And I think with that, we'll close. We'll stop sharing, but want to say a big thank you to everybody who joined us today. We had such a high interest in this. I think over 1,000 people registered, and 320 people at one point were tuned in to listen to this information. So thank you so much, everybody. We really appreciate you being with us, and we hope you've learned a little something about the importance of caring for trees during times of drought, and feel empowered to have access to the DWP rebate programs and water conservation programs that are available, and to keep up the great momentum in helping protect, save our water and our trees. Thanks, everyone.